What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking all about why I strongly believe flying a long range drone like this will make you into a much better cinematic FPV pilot. Whether you want to get more jobs doing cinematic video productions, making dope promo videos, or just overall becoming a better FPV pilot, today we're going to get into 3 main reasons why I think this is what you really need in your life. So without further ado, let's get into it. Alright guys, so the number 1 reason why I strongly believe flying long range drones makes you into a better pilot is because when you're at a new environment such as this, when it's so vast, such a large environment, it really forces you to understand more about how the air unit works. For my example, I'm using the O3 air unit, and just by flying around these really large environments, flying next to kind of like a lot of trees, flying over water, flying in a bunch of just different conditions, it really helps you understand how far you can push the O3 air unit and really what its limits are. And I think that's really important when you're flying these types of drones, because it's really important to understand as much as you can when you're practicing on your own, when you're just flying a GoPro, because when you're going to be hired for these bigger productions, when you're going to be flying like a Red Komodo, an Alexa Mini, Blackmagic, you want to be able to make sure you're as confident as you are and you know exactly what the limits are of your system, of your drone, of your goggles, of your RC link before you really put that much money at risk. So that's why I'm always trying to find new spots. I'm always trying to find spots where I can really fly super freaking far, because it really helps you understand how far I can push it. For example, when I'm flying around and I kind of dip slightly below like a mountain or slightly below like a bed of trees, and I see my megabits really drop down and go to like 8 megabits, 5 megabits, I can really learn from that, and I can know how not to do that again, and I can know how to mitigate that, and I could really kind of teach myself how to not lose connection, because the last thing you want is to completely lose connection, because that's going to be the worst. Like, that's going to be extremely risky and very high probability that you're going to lose your drone. So that's why it's so important to always be testing, always be really just trying to find the limits of the O3 air unit, see where you can fly, see where the connection gets low, see where the connection is great. And by doing these constant flights and really just kind of trying to keep an eye on your megabits, keeping an eye on your video link, your RC link, it's really going to teach you a lot in the long run and help you get better at flying these bigger drones. In addition, I think flying a long range drone like this is a really good intermediary step into flying Cinelifters. For example, before I got into 7-inch long range flying, I was flying like a 3.5-inch Cinewhoop, like the Gep RC Cinelog. I was flying 5 inches, I was flying a 2.5-inch, but those are all pretty small drones, and it doesn't really kind of prepare you for the feeling of a Cinelifter. I think a 7.5-inch drone like this, I have 2009 1280 kV motors. This is perfect because when I transition to a Cinelifter like the Thick, which is an X8 octocopter drone, it has relatively the same size motors and relatively the same size props. So coming from this to a Thick, I feel like it's not going to be that much different. Sure, it's going to have 8 motors now. Sure, I'm going to be flying my Red Komodo. It's going to be a little bit heavier, but in general, it's the same relative size, same relative feel. So that's why I think it's a really great practice to start flying these drones, especially if you want to get into Cinelifter flying, because it's going to be a really good kind of middle step. Because going from 5-inch, going from 3.5-inch straight to a Cinelifter, it's going to feel way different for you just because of the weight, the feeling of the motors, but also most importantly, your confidence isn't going to be there, because I strongly believe that being a drone pilot is kind of like being like a real pilot, or like a comedian for that matter. Hear me out. When you ask a pilot, how long have you been flying? You don't just ask like, oh, how many years you've been flying? You want to know exactly how many hours do they have logged. Like, they legit keep a log of how many hours they did. Also, like comedians too, like how many shows have they done? How many hours have they spent on stage performing? And very similarly, that's how an FPV pilot operates. It's like, I want to know exactly how many hours you have in the air, you know? Obviously, we don't really keep logs, but what I'm trying to say is the more time you have on sticks, the better. And that leads me to my next point, is that I think flying long range is a great time to just get good stick time. For example, if you're like a freestyle pilot, you might have some fun, you know, flying a few packs around an urban environment, doing really sick loops and stuff. But in reality, you're only getting around like 5 minutes of flight time because you're really pushing it, you're pushing the throttle, you're really draining that battery. But when I'm out here at these really large environments, I can get around 10 minutes of flight time, nice cruising, and it allows you to just get really nice, good stick time and really practice those smooth cinematic shots, really practicing just getting those really nice takes, those really nice one takes of just really smooth 3-minute, 4-minute uninterrupted flights that just look really awesome in the edit. So that's why I think that's really important, because when you think about it, a lot of these commercial productions, a lot of these movies, like, sure, sometimes they do want some cool acro stuff, you know, kind of flipping into a shot or going into really tight gaps, but for the most part, they just want really smooth cinematic stuff. Like when you see the car commercials, movies, it's always that really nice, long, sweeping motion into the shot. When you think about it, the industry just shifted from like traditional helicopter setups to drones within about like the past half decade or so. So when you consider that, it makes sense to think that directors, producers, and a lot of cinematographers aren't really into that crazy acro, you know, flippy floppy drone stuff yet. Like they're still kind of accustomed to that smooth cinematic stuff. So that's why I think flying in environments like this really helps you dial in just that really good stick movement, that really good cinematic motion that's gonna look great in cinematic productions and movies. Sorry I'm saying cinematic so much, but it's a buzzword right now, I can't help it. And the last point I wanna make on this first topic is the fact that I think flying long range really helps you build up your confidence. Like, as I was mentioning earlier about flight hours, like it's so important to just get so many flights logged in of just uninterrupted, really great, no problem flights, you know, because you guys know that feeling when you crash, it's really not great, because after you crash, like you really kind of feel unconfident in your next few flights. Like you don't feel confident about hitting gaps, you don't feel confident about going forward because you're kind of traumatized in a sense of crashing. So that's why flying long range is so great, because it really helps you kind of mitigate that stress and really just puts you into stressful environments over and over and over. And time again, when you come back, land your drone safely, finish up the day with a successful mission, it really helps build up that confidence. And one thing I want to talk about is the fact that flying in long range environments, it really helps you understand fail-safing, because when you're flying so far in these environments, you really have to kind of adapt to the possibility of losing connection. And thank God it hasn't really happened to me much before, but it really helps you kind of force you to think about options to mitigate that and how to solve that if you do lose video. For example, if I'm flying this thing and I go super far over that ridge and I lose video, because typically you lose video before RC link, because I fly TBS Crossfire, which is a really good long range crossfire remote control link. And let's say I do lose video on my goggles too. One thing you can do to mitigate that is, of course, you could set up your GPS rescue. I have a GPS here, but personally, I don't actually use that. But what you could do is immediately once you lose video, you could legit just flip into angle mode, have that mapped on a switch, make sure you memorize that, flip into angle mode right away and manage your throttle. Because if you don't have angle mode, what's gonna happen is when you stay in acro, since you don't have the goggle feed, you're probably gonna go like this, you're gonna flip over and crash. But once you have angle mode, you can switch into angle mode and just make sure you can hover it. So then even no matter how far you are away, I could be a few miles away, I could still make sure I'm hovering in the air. And then my other plan is to put some more LEDs on the drone. And once you could see the drone, just that little speck flashing in the air, you'll be able to fly that back home line of sight. And this definitely does take practice. I haven't practiced this much before, but I plan on making a video in the future about this. But I think that's gonna be really helpful, because in case you lose goggles, you could just flip it into angle mode and just fly back line of sight like a Mavic. So I know it's easier said than done, but that's why it's so important to practice these things, because when you're on a shoot, flying your Komodo, flying a Blackmagic, you really want to be able to practice these things and be confident that you can fly your drone back to home point even if you lose goggles, because the last thing you want is to lose your Komodo in the bushes miles away, because let's be honest, that's quite a hike to get that thing back. So I'm going to wrap up this point now, but that's why 7-inch long range is so helpful, because it just really teaches you all the different nuances of flying long range, flying bigger drones, how to deal with connection, losing video, all that good stuff that flying around in a park or around a schoolyard doing freestyle might not be able to teach you. So I think that's a really important point to note. All right, guys, so the next point I want to talk about is I strongly believe flying long range FPV really helps you become a better aerial cinematographer. And what I mean by that is when you're flying around these really vast environments, sure, I understand there's not too many subjects. I'm not chasing a sick motorcycle. I'm not chasing cars. I'm not chasing a sick mountain biker, although I could. It's just such great practice to really just practice your nice flight times, those nice long lines, those cinematic shots. And with each pack, you start to understand your environment better. Like typically what I experience is like the first 2 packs, I'm just kind of flying around, checking out my environment. But usually that 3rd pack is when I really start to understand my environment and I know exactly which shots are gonna look the best. For example, just the other day, I was at this new spot. First 2 packs, just kind of chilling around, having some fun. But then that 3rd pack, I really got those money shots because I really found the line. I really found this really awesome ridge that looks absolutely amazing at sunset because it was nice and backlit, had some cool cows, and yeah, just really awesome to get that confidence and really just kind of let your creativity unleash on that 3rd pack because you know exactly what the lighting's gonna be, you know exactly how your drone's gonna react on that 3rd pack, and it's just so satisfying to just really get that money shot after you've been planning for a few packs already. So that's really important. And another thing is, I'm the type of person where I really love to fly at sunset because, I mean, let's be honest, lighting just looks way better at sunset, at blue hour. It's called golden hour for a reason. The sky starts turning purple, pink, orange. It just looks absolutely great on drones. And I think it's a great time to practice your camera settings. Like at sunset, the sun really changes lighting conditions pretty fast. Like it goes from like super bright to sun's dipping to blue hour all within about like 30, 40 minutes. So it really forces you, it really encourages you to practice your camera settings. Like, are you gonna do ISO 100? Are you gonna use ND16? Are you gonna use ND8, ND4? And maybe at blue hour, you might go no ND and bump up your ISO to 400. And all of these things really come with practice. Like, you really can't know what kind of results you're gonna get until you really shoot it with those settings, go home and check it out on the big screen. Because when you're gonna be hired for these types of shots, you wanna know exactly from real world experience what kind of settings are gonna be the best. Because the last thing you want is for someone to pay you like $800, $1,000 to get really awesome FPV shots. And then you get back home and you notice, oh my God, the footage is super dark, unusable. That's the last thing you want. So that's why it's so important to come out on your own, practice these types of things, use your GoPro, use whatever you want, and just dial in those settings, see what looks best, experiment. For example, the other day, I was in the valley, it started looking really dark in the valley, but then I noticed like, once you get up there, like it's still pretty bright. I decided to go with ND4 and it turned out pretty good. Maybe in hindsight, I probably would have stuck with ND8 because it was a little bit bright up there, but the shot is still usable, still looks good. So that's why it's just so important to practice that kind of stuff. Really just dial in the settings, see what looks best. And I'm really excited because I actually am gonna buy my friend's Thick tomorrow. And I'm so excited because I feel like I'm just graduating to the next level because I'm kind of getting bored of GoPro. I think GoPro Heroes are amazing. The camera is great for what it is, but I'm really excited to take that next step, go up to Cinelifters, use my red Komodo, and really just start dialing in my settings, use the Laowa, use different lenses, use different filters. I'm really excited to start using real filters like a Black Pro Mist, real ND filters, and just have fun with the lens, all the different combinations, and just really trying to perfect my image and really trying to get the best image I can, because in the end, I'm an aerial cinematographer, and I feel like that's how you can really express yourself and really kind of separate your drone footage from the masses. Because let's be honest, there's so many drone pilots out there, so much footage looks the same. I feel like you can really start to dial in your look and really make your work valuable and make your work unique as an artist when you're able to use different lenses like anamorphic lenses, Laowa cinema lenses, different filters. I'm really excited for this. So yeah, that's gonna wrap up that point. Super important to understand how your camera works and what settings work best. All right, guys, so the third and final point I want to talk about as to why I strongly believe flying long-range drones in vast environments like this especially is so helpful in becoming a better FPV pilot is it helps you really understand battery management and how these drones work. Because I'm sure some of you guys are coming from Mavics and those smart drones. Those things really don't teach you much. I mean, all they really teach you is, okay, once it gets to 20%, it's going to come back automatically. And that's all you really know. It's like an iPhone, you know, there's nothing really to learn there. But when you're flying these things, it's definitely much more advanced. And I really like flying FPV in these big environments because you can really understand how the drone reacts to different flying styles. Like, for example, just the other day when I was at that new map, those first two packs I was flying around, like I was going kind of crazy, you know, I was really throttling. I was going around, really exploring my environment. I was going super far. And you could really learn and notice that, like, when you push the throttle harder, obviously the battery drains a lot faster. But it's just so important to understand that from your own experience, because like I said earlier, that when you're flying on these professional sets, you want to know exactly when you should land and exactly when your drone is going to legit start losing power. I heard a story from Oh My God, he's a really good FPV pilot, and he told me that in one of his videos that he lost his Komodo actually because one of his ACs accidentally put on dead batteries. Like they probably only had like 25% left. They put on dead batteries. It was probably a golden hour. They're losing light. He immediately put up the drone, went over the treetops, and yeah, he probably wasn't looking at the voltage. And before you knew it, the drone just started lagging and fell into the trees, and it wasn't recovered. And that was a really good learning experience from him because yeah, batteries are legit your lifeline. Like it's like the difference between coming back and losing your drone. So that's why it's so important to learn about these. And it's just so good to be able to understand how different flying styles affect it. Like for example, like that last pack I flew the other day, I only had 3 packs that day, so I really wanted to extend that last pack, really get as much juice as I could out of it. So I just changed my flying style. I really just kind of feathered that throttle, did the absolute minimum throttle I could to stay in the air, and I was able to fly quite a bit longer. I flew for about like 8-10 minutes that time. So yeah, that's why it's so important to understand how your flying style and how these different batteries affect your drones. Alright guys, so I think I just finished flying FPV for this week, and overall really great week. And honestly, it's so awesome to end it on like this location. Actually right now we're in, honestly I don't even know where we are. I just went towards Half Moon Bay, just kept going south, just down towards Santa Cruz, and I kept trying to find a good place to launch. You know, like today, earlier I was thinking, should I go to Point Maury? But then I looked and I realized it's like a national park technically. And in addition, today's also 420 and it's a super nice day earlier today, so it was so freaking crowded. So I was like, you know what? Like I had a long day at work and I just wasn't really feeling comfortable like trying to fly when there's a bunch of people around me. And technically they're right, because they're actually not allowed to fly there. It's called the Golden Gate National Recreation Area. It's basically like a mini national park. It's part of like the Golden Gate Bridge area. But anyways, like everything worked out, you know, because like I just kept going south, kept looking for cool spots. And it's funny because every time I miss one, I'm always like, oh crap, I got a U-turn and then pull out at that hiking trail or whatever. But then every time I keep waiting, I keep finding better ones. So then like I just kept waiting. I kept seeing good spots to pull over, but I just kept holding it out because I haven't been this far down south in a while. So I really wanted to try something new today. And I'm honestly kind of bored of flying Half Moon Bay. So I just want to go down south more, and this spot was absolutely amazing. I mean, check this out. Like what really drew me to this spot in the first place was off the highway. I could see that it was next to all like these really sick sand dunes. Like everything looked really low. It looks super low-key here. It's not crowded. And I don't know, I just wanted to find a place where there's like a super good flat area for me to stand on and my drone could really cover some good ground, because I feel like that's where the 7-inch really shines. Like right now it's extremely windy. I have no idea how windy it is. Probably it's like 20 miles per hour. And like a 5-inch drone, a Cinewoop would really struggle here. But on the 7-inch, like you're freaking flying. It's like the wind doesn't even really matter, and if anything, it actually helps you out, because when the wind is pushing you, you're able to build so much momentum and get super smooth shots. Like today, I was a little bit worried that the wind was gonna make it all wobbly and hard to get shots, but I feel like a few times I just really caught that current, or just the motors really just cut through the wind, because I was legit just free flowing. I was super freaking flying. I mean, that felt so good. That was great, guys.